Hello, my name is Holman-Allgood, and I am the Animal Health Officer. Today I'll be talking about control and prevention of Ebola virus disease in relationship to animals. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations posed three main questions. What is the likelihood for humans to be exposed to the Ebola virus through close contact with wild animal species within regions currently affected with the Ebola virus in Africa? What is the likelihood for humans to be exposed to the Ebola virus through close contact with domestic mammalian species in areas of Africa where Ebola virus is present? What is the likelihood of Ebola spreading to an unaffected country through movement of meat from wild animals originating from Ebola virus suitable or affected African countries? So if we look at these three questions, when in terms of animal and control and prevention, we really have to investigate what is the main role of domestic and wild animals in transmission of the Ebola virus, which we will go over in the next slide, and how is the movement of meat are the ban of the regulation of meat movement between different countries going to help with decreasing Ebola outbreak? If we look at this slide, today we're going to go over the transmission. So the transmission of the Ebola virus currently, it's a zoonotic disease. Being a zoonotic disease, evidence to date shows that the bat, specifically the fruit bat, but we do have new evidence showing that it has been found in other species of bats as the reservoir host for Ebola virus. Bats carry this virus. They show no clinical symptoms or any signs, and they are able to harbor it and transmit it. They're able to transmit it to other animals like apes, monkeys, or antelopes, and as well as humans. Now, when we talk about humans, it's called a spillover event because evidence shows that it's very rare for animals to transmit to humans, but it's not uncommon. And still much is to be discovered in this spillover event. So a spillover event occurs when an animal or a human becomes infected with Ebola virus through contact with the reservoir host. But remember, it's hard to track when the reservoir host is infected and when are they transmitting it. So what is the true life cycle of the Ebola virus within these bats and these other animals, which is something that really needs to be discovered. The human-to-human transmission we know a lot about. It's bodily fluids, dead corpse that were affected with Ebola, unprotected health workers, as you could see, that are not dressed appropriately. Transmission can occur that way. And then unprotected contact with blood or bodily fluids, as we can see in this transmission here. So the role of animals that they play. So the Ebola virus was discovered in 1976 near the Ebola River in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's believed, like stated before, that the virus is animal-borne, with fruit bats being the most likely source. But as the animal health officer, it's very difficult, and it's posing a lot of difficulty with control and prevention because we don't really know the natural life cycle in these bats. These bats, they can harbor it, they can transmit it, their body fluids as well, sick bats, and they can transmit it as well. And humans eat wild meat, especially in Africa, and these bats, these apes, these antelopes are a part of that wild meat that's being consumed by humans. So much research postulates that bats are the key animal that is the natural host for the Ebola virus, but we need to confirm this. So in order to confirm this, we really need to get down to the basis of how do these bats acquire the virus? How do they transmit it? How long is the natural life cycle in a bat? So in 2019, scientists found evidence of the Ebola virus within a species of the bat in Liberia without any known human cases. This was the first time a bat was found to have the virus in West Africa. Scientists found both genetic material from the virus and antibodies within this greater long-fingered bat in Liberia's northeastern Nubia district. So this was an important find for us because it basically said that they can carry it and they can mount a response. So I feel like playing off this discovery, we can enlist a group of scientists to track the bats. And not just one species of bat, not just the greater long-fingered bat, but all the fruit bat. Track different species of bats and see how they migrate, see how they move, and really try to, and we should tag them in order to understand the natural life cycle of the Ebola virus. I feel like a lot of research has been focused on the human transmission, but I feel like in order to stop it at its source, we really need to understand the bats, understand how they acquire it, and understand how they're able to mount response within their own systems. And by doing this, in doing so, we could potentially see the migratory pattern of the disease from the zoonotic perspective, which is something, as spoken before, is still yet to be understood. So this is a key thing that needs to occur. And in doing so, I think that this will decrease the rate of transmission between bats and other primates and other animals, as well as bats in the human population. Another role, the role of hunting in the Ebola transmission. So what is bushmeat? Bushmeat, also known as raw or minimally processed meat that comes from wild animals in certain regions of the world, including Africa, can pose a communicable disease. So if we have humans eating raw meat or not very processed meat, it's not cooked, it's not cleaned properly, it's not disinfected properly, that poses a big risk for transmission as well. And as we said before, some of the major players in Ebola transmission is primates, bats, which are considered types of bushmeat. Monkeys and bats are a common source of bushmeat. Bushmeat is often, it can be smoked, it can be dried, it can be salted, but these procedures are not sufficient to render the meat being non-infectious. So since these are the types of processes that certain people in Africa and other countries are cooking this meat, it's not sufficient. So when assessing the risk of animal transmission, wild animals such as fruit bats, which is a source of food for many people, are a hazard and a high risk. Currently, the FAO, they recommend people infected and at high-risk areas, they don't hunt, they don't dress, or they don't eat bats, but a recommendation is not enough anymore. And I feel that even meat from domestic and wild animals is causing a high risk in the human population. There's much evidence to show that domestic and wild animals are being illegally transmitted from Africa to Europe to the United States in various forms. So now we're not only getting into the risk of transmitting this meat within one continent, now we're moving into separate continents, which could cause not just an epidemic in one continent, but a worldwide epidemic, which is something that we do not want. So currently, the United States fines people for bringing bushmeat in $250,000. And in the context of the 2014 Western African outbreaks, activities like hunting, trading, consuming meat from wild animals have been banned in infected countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia, and other West African countries to prevent wildlife to human spillover events. But the thing is, regulations can be put, but we're still seeing illegal movement of bushmeat, of wild animals. So I feel like we need to start hammering down on this and really start to put more regulations and bans on hunting in these countries of these wild animals to decrease the transmission of Ebola. People should not be eating it. People should not be handling it because we're not sure, as said again, how long is the transmission rate? How can we stop the infection? So in order to decrease infection rate in these high-risk areas, people need to stop moving bushmeat around from continent to continent. I think a similar form of penalty should be placed on people in Africa, not just making it illegal, but bans and fines. And specifically, we want to start fining people, and legal action should be taken so that people understand that this is a serious issue. We will monitor to see if in decrease in hunting, do we have a decrease in Ebola outbreaks? Do we have a decrease in Ebola transmission? Is there a correlation between the two? And if there is, then it will show that it's not just a high risk, rare event happening, but it's something that is a continuous event happening. And it's not rare that humans are getting Ebola virus from the meat that they're eating and the meat that they're handling. Going back to the 3 questions that we talked about with transmission of domestic, transmission of from wild animals, and transmission of meat handling, I feel like if we stop the meat handling and the eating of the wild and domestic animals, as well as if we start to track the species of bats, we will start to understand and start to really get a grasp on the evolution of this disease, and it will help us decrease the transmission. Thank you so much. These are my references.